Welcome back to SoccerX Connected 100 and our partners at Teamworks, leaders in athlete engagement. Our next panel will be looking into the latest FIFA reforms, trying to get a handle on the game. They'll be looking into the latest training, agent and financial jurisdictions being put in place. Let's introduce them for you today. Emilio Garcia Silvero, Legal Director at FIFA. Roy Vermeer, Legal Director at FIFPro. Patricia Moyesian, lawyer and president of the AIAF. And finally, Daniel Cravo, senior partner at Cravo Pastel Balbuena. Daniel, it's over to you.
Thank you, Rob. Thank you for giving me the opportunity for hosting this huge team that we have here. I'm dressed formal for this occasion, but you are released from that because you are top speakers and you manage these topics that we're going to see here. Since the clock is ticking, we don't have too much time. So, Emilio, I would begin with you, giving you the ball. If you can say, what was the core of the regulation on coaches? Why it was necessary to adopt an express regulation on coaches instead of relying on the application by analogy or the jurisprudence using the tools that you had concerning the relationships between clubs and players. The floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Daniel. Hello, everyone. Good afternoon from Spain. First of all, I would like to thank to you, Daniel and SoccerX, for this invitation. It's a great pleasure to share the stage with some very good colleagues and friends. When it comes to your question, coaches, why we are regulating, or at least introducing some basic legal concepts or basic employment conditions for coaches at international level. So the answer is simple. I think that coaches have been put aside for a long time, or forever, at FIFA level. So, you know, if you look at the FIFA transfer regulations, the modern FIFA transfer regulations approved in 2001, you know, coaches, they have never been there. So, you know, they have been forgotten by FIFA. And that's why, you know, in 2019, 2020, we started considering putting coaches on the stage again. And we opened the negotiations with the stakeholders, with FIFPro, with the clubs, and with the leagues, and we passed these regulations. So again, it's, at least from my side, from our side, is putting coaches on the stage and putting coaches on the right track, you know? Because again, I think that my perspective is they have been forgotten for years and years and years when it comes to the international transfer system in football.
And which are the core of the rules that protects the coaches?
What we decided is to implement some basic employment rules for coaches at international level. So giving the football community a more accurate legal system, more transparency, and definitely something in which coaches can look at when signing contracts at international level: duration of the contracts, form of the contract, breach of the contract. Again, some basic principles that we extracted from the real RSTP, so, and then translated into the world of coaches. Of course, it's the first step, and we need to see how the system evolves. We need to see how the jurisprudence of FIFA and the jurisprudence of CAS see these amendments, and we are completely open to evolve if we think that coaches need more protection at international level. Again, this is just the beginning, and depending on the evolution of the jurisprudence, we are fully committed to evolve, and we are fully committed to approve new regulations if need be.
Okay, thank you, Emilio. Patricia, can you already see any development in the protection of the interests of the coaches? It was really necessary to regulate it expressly. And finally, Is there something that is still missing? Is it possible to fill it already?
Thank you, Daniel. Thank you. First of all, thank you, Daniel, for the invitation, and thank you, Socrates. And hi to everyone. Good afternoon from Paris. I think, yes, indeed, it was very important for coaches to have this protection, because before it was under national law, and as we know, national law are very different depending on the countries. So it was, and it improves really not only the coach situation, but also for clubs. But I have one perspective, one question is, do we, maybe we're gonna see now a transfer market of coach, since for me, the transfer market for players is based on the RSTP. So nowadays we know that coaches are under the pretty same regulation, meaning that a termination without just cause could imply not only indemnity, but also disciplinary sanction. So that I would like to ask if FIFA had think about this, having a transfer market of coaches. We know that there are coaches which are transferred by a contract between the two clubs, the former club and the new club. It happened on the national and not only, but also internationally. But this will be interesting. And the second thing, I was a little bit surprised because I had a case to see that the new regulation, Annex 8, has been applied immediately, meaning that even for contracts which have been executed before this new regulation, the new regulation applied. And this is pretty strange for not only coaches, but clubs who couldn't expect a new regulation applied to the contract. So the immediate application is also something that it might be a challenge before CAS, but I know that FIFA considers that it has to be applied immediately. And this doesn't give a lot of security on the contract which have been signed before. I don't know if Emilio has a view on that.
Patricia brought a very hot topic just in the beginning with 1 minute of the game. So listen, I think Patricia is suggesting that we might have some discussion about a possible application of Article 17.2 in regards to the coach market, more or less like that. Emilio, if you want to wrap it up very quickly, and I know that probably this case that Patricia addresses is still ongoing before the CAS, right?
Look, Article 17 is vital in the context of the RSTP for players. Imagine transferring the whole system to coaches. No, the first point raised by Patricia is even more interesting. No, because what she's suggesting along the lines is, a kind of ITC TMS transfer system also for players. So in other words, that the coaches are fully integrated into the FIFA transfer system. At this stage, we are not considering this. I'm completely honest. So that's something that we can look at in cooperation with the stakeholders. But definitely, we are not considering an ITC system or the full integration of coaches into TMS. But I fully agree with Patricia. More and more, we see an international transfer of coaches, coming from different areas of the world, from South America to Europe, from Europe to South America, Central America, North America, Africa, Asia. So, the system and the market exists, but, the idea that we had is just try to implement things step by step. The first thing that we would like to see is the evolution of these basic principles. And also, we are doing this because we think that this is needed. Again, the coaches were not very well protected by FIFA over the last 100 years. and this is the first step. But sometimes, we are doing this again in cooperation with FIPRO. That was extremely useful in this context, also clubs, leagues. But in the future, we would like to see a counterpart when it comes to coaches. No, we would like to see a coaches union in which, we can rely on these discussions. Again, FIPRO was extremely useful for us, and they did a great job, but they are representing players. When it comes to coaches, so, we had bilateral discussions with some coaches associations. FIPRO helped us to identify some coaches associations, but I'm absolutely sure that in the next 2, 3, 4 years, we will see a new international coaches associations, and this will be a nice opportunity to discuss face-to-face and bilaterally all these matters that concern coaches. So the full integration of coaches into the transfer system, ITC, TMS, maybe not, and also the particularities of Article 17 and some other matters of the RSTP into this Annex 8.
Okay, thank you, Emilio. This is a hot topic. We have to come back to that in future discussions. Roy, may we change the subject to regulations on women, okay? And I'd like to hear from you if FIFPro in the end gets satisfied with the outcome of the regulations. Was there any specific point that was more problematic under the player's perspective in the negotiations or the discussions with FIFA and the stakeholders?
Well, I think if we look at the eventual outcome, we were fairly satisfied with what entered into the FIFA regulations right now. As you know, we included maternity leave and certain rules around pregnancy. Of course, female players were already covered by the FIFA regulations, and they applied anyway. But now we have something specific on maternity leave. For example, the maternity leave itself is a minimum of 14 weeks of paid absence with at least 8 weeks to be taken after the birth of the child. We have a 2/3 salary guaranteed under the contract, and we have certain new rules on the termination of contract for or once a player becomes pregnant or is on maternity leave. If during that period of time a club would terminate, it's presumed that this was due to that pregnancy or due to taking the maternity leave. And especially for those rules, one would wonder, do we really need that? It's common sense. Well, not so long ago, I think it was 3 years ago or 4 years ago, I just joined FIFPro. We had a case actually in Venezuela about a player who became pregnant and the club terminated their contract. And the union said, don't worry about it. This for sure will not fly under our system. This is illegal. But the NDRC in Venezuela actually said, yes, you're allowed to terminate the contract because the player cannot play right now. So you see a need that there was a necessity to address these things. And I think all in all, we came to a proper set of rules. I think FIFA was very supportive from the very beginning. They also seemed there was a gap there, and they put their weight behind it. Obviously, when the player union comes with certain proposals, the clubs and leagues, they will not jump in the air and embrace everything. But I think also in these discussions, they were fairly supportive, ambitious to change things. Again, want to stress it's a first step. I think everybody, it's the same with the coaches. We need to see how it develops. We have more wishes and desires and things we think need to be regulated at a later stage around pregnancies and maternity leaves. Also, for example, the paid leave for fathers or the non-pregnant mother, etc. But that's for a later stage. And I think FIFA is also still motivated to tackle that. So all in all, very good first step in good discussions, but still more to come, hopefully.
Okay, thank you, Roy. Patricia, your thoughts about that? It was actually a concrete improvement in the protection of the the women footballers, and is it possible already to check the impact somehow of these regulations in the relationship between female players and clubs?
Yeah, I think it's very important, and it improves, and it was for all women players. It is very important, and I talked with some colleagues from IAF, especially Reyes Belver from Spain, and she's involved a lot in women players and women conditions and situation. Now, what they said is how to be sure and how FIFA will enforce this new regulation to the member association. So how FIFA will coordinate and the implementation with their member association, because we in Europe and in some different countries have strong regulation regarding women employment situation, but not in a lot of countries there are not. So I think now the next steps is how FIFA will implement and enforce this regulation into the national association.
Okay, thank you. I also think that not only regarding the female footballers, but in general for the protection of the women's rights, it was a very important statement from FIFA and FIFPro. I think the entities.
Daniel.
Yes.
Daniel, if I may, I think that Patricia identified the key point, because the big difference between Annex 8 coaches and the female provisions is that the female provisions are mandatory at domestic level, while coaches are only, regulations to be applied at international level, and then the federations are completely free to integrate this into their local regulations. But when it comes to female provisions, these are mandatory as from 1st July 2022 at domestic level. So this is the big difference. And I think that Patricia identified the key point. Now, we have the regulations, we are all happy or more or less satisfied. Of course, we need to look at the evolution, and if need be, we need to amend or we need to evolve. But the key point here is the enforcement, and how can we guarantee that in certain jurisdictions, in certain countries, the federations implement these provisions at domestic level. So as Patricia said, the situation in Europe is more or less stable. So I've seen this in my country, in Spain, the Spanish Football Federation already implemented and circulated matters concerning female players coming from FIFA regulations in a circular letter. So they are doing great. But Europe is not Africa. Africa is not Central America. Asia is not South America. So the world is super big, and this is the key issue here. So what I can say is that when we implemented for the first time the RSTP, the modern RSTP in 2001, we did the same, and we are still suffering, and Roy is here. So, in certain jurisdictions, after 20 years, the basics of the RSTP are a big challenge. So I would say that it's a question of time, but of course, we are fully committed to guarantee that our member associations, FIFA member associations, implement these basic provisions at domestic level. But I cannot hide that this is the next challenge for all of us.
Yeah, if I can add to that, Emilia and Patricia, I think that's absolutely key. As of July 1, they should have implemented. I haven't seen a whole lot who did it. I've seen a few countries who did it. I also don't think that Europe per se is doing better than the rest. I know for a fact that, for example, Greece passed new regulations and they didn't include it. So look, these rules are ultimately, they're mandatory to be implemented. And if you don't do it, that could be disciplinary sanctions. And yeah, you can count on FIFPro pursuing that. And of course, they have had time already. but it's something very close to our heart. And if the member associations, the national associations, do not follow up on it, we will pursue action on that, how to convince them to implement it as soon as possible.
Absolutely. We surely have a very good set of rules, I would say, in place now, but good rules without uniform enforcement and a concrete enforcement doesn't mean much. And I think we can jump to a subject now that is the fact that FIFA is, I think it's quite a while already, striking hard the club's overspends, which is a very difficult task, also, we know. And Emilio, if you may, we're not just among lawyers, so if you may just describe a little bit the content or the aim of Article 12 bis and 24 bis specifically, 12 bis and 12 bis and 24 bis, and these articles, this application is already achieved the goal of FIFA, or still you can see that there are some gaps to be fulfilled in this pursuit of preventing the clubs to spend more than they are able to do without jeopardizing the players' rights, the other clubs' rights, the agents and coaches, and so on?
Well, the question is super complex. If we take your points broadly, obviously we refer to Article 12 bis and 24 bis and ter, and I think that the scope and the aim of these articles was simple. We needed at FIFA a proper, fast, and credible enforcement of our decisions. So, we are dealing with thousands of cases every year. And I think that FIFA did a great job over the last 20 years, providing the market with a tool in order to solve disputes in football. So, no one can say, you are doing wrong or you did wrong. I think that over the last 20 years, the DRC player status chamber system, both were an example. Obviously, the clubs and the players, they use the system a lot because we have seen problems all around the world, and that's why numbers grow and grow and grow and grow over the last 20 years. And then in a certain way, from 2015 until 2017, 18, 19, the system was not very effective, was not fast enough for clubs. With these new two articles and the implementation of some other administrative tools, I think that the system has changed a lot. So, we are far from being perfect. That's obvious, but we are more effective, and definitely we are quicker than in the past. So again, there are a lot of things to do until we can say, the system is perfect. But I think that the quality is good. And as from 2019, 2020, you can expect that your cases are managed in a more or less fast way, and you receive the grounds of your decision in the next 20, 25 days, 30 days on average. So the system works, but we are also working on things to improve the system. As we announced during the FIFA annual law review, we are implementing, or we are working on the implementation of an IT tool in order to process all cases through the legal hub, the legal system. So right now the system is based on emails. In the past was fax, if you remember well, Patricia, Daniel, and of course Roy being part of the FIFA administration. So then suddenly, we moved to, and we welcome emails, and now we are working on this legal platform in order to put emails aside and to invite the stakeholders to work with us just through the legal hub. And I think that this next step will change everything. As soon as we can guarantee that the system works, as soon as we can guarantee that the stakeholders, the clients, they file the claims through the legal hub, I think that the system will be even faster, more effective, and we will see these changes in the near future. But again, I'm satisfied, I'm personally satisfied, and I think that we at FIFA, we are satisfied with these 2 articles, with the implementation of these 2 articles. But of course, maybe Patricia, from the side of the clients, obviously also FIPRO, Roy, maybe they have a different consideration. But, I think that these 2 articles were a very good idea, and we are, again, comfortably satisfied with the outcome in 2021.
Patricia, I would like to hear from you if you have any comments on what Emilio says, and if you share with me the impression or the conviction that the transfer ban is what actually one of the very important tools if we speak about sanctions, because especially in South America, for instance, or any club that is an association, nobody likes to have a prohibition to hire new players. So how this tool can be considered a key of the system, this sanction specifically?
I think I fully agree with Emilio. It improves a lot, and the main threat is the sanction, disciplinary sanction. And I can say that for my client clubs, it's very important, and the system is going much faster. We can get a decision quickly, to have the grounds quickly, and this threatens. So we can understand that the main threat is not financial, it's the sanction. And also for players, but Roy will say much better than me, for players and also for coaches, it is very important to have this sanction, which is termination with just cause. And this also, it works. It works, meaning that, but still, it works if you have an international case.
Yeah.
And that's, for me, is the next step, because all these tools are working perfectly. The legal platform will be probably a fantastic tool, but we still remain with the national cases. And we realize now that as club or as players, being having the possibility to ask for FIFA jurisdiction and FIFA proceeding is an advantage now, because you have a faster decision, you have sanction, it is very efficient, you can enforce it. That's very important. But Roy, maybe you can say more than I on the players.
No, I totally agree, Patricia. I think 24 bis is a blessing in that sense that, we get the sanctions right away. It will even get better with the new rules applying, saying it is implemented straight away, even in the middle of a registration period, because beforehand there was a kind of an execution saying, oh, well, it starts only from the next one. No, it imposes right away. Why would we wait, right? And I think for players, very different in the old system, they see that something happens straight away. And that gives them also some confidence, right? Because back in the days, you would be the disciplinary committee, and it could take quite a while before actually disciplinary sanction would be imposed. And you would have to tell players, yeah, it's at the disciplinary committee and they will impose something, but we don't know. Now it's there right away. And you can tell the player, look, simply the club has a decision to make. They either pay you or they don't, but if they don't, then they cannot hire new players. So that's something which I think is satisfying in that way. Now, on a national level, I also agree with you. There is a lot of difficulties still in a lot of countries in even in getting a fair process and independent arbitration. Now, then I always take the example of Serbia, where there is nothing of the likes. Right now, it's not even functioning. So the players cannot go anywhere. They cannot ask for it, and they need to ask for a termination at the courts. They cannot terminate themselves. So I haven't been paid in Serbia as a Serbian player for 3 months. I am going to ask for the termination, but there's no one there to take a decision. And then back in the days when there was an NDRC, they would take the decision, but there was no disciplinary committee to enforce it. So that remains still a big problem. We've had the NDRC project with FIFA, which had, I think, various results. Some were very good, some were not so good. We need to follow up on that, and we need to ensure that also the NDRCs and national associations take the responsibility and start enforcing their decisions and providing this independent arbitration. But in some countries, they simply don't want to do it, and there are not a lot of consequences. Patrice, I don't know what your experience is with that, but
I think that maybe a tool, but I don't know how FIFA would consider. The tool could be, as a lawyer, to advise our client, clubs or coaches or players, to impose a clause giving jurisdiction to FIFA, even in national. I think that could be. I don't know how FIFA will consider such a clause.
I think that the idea is brilliant, as always. You know, all these ideas coming from Patricia are really very interesting. Then practically, you know, I had different discussions with Roy. How can we enforce this at national level? Because, you know, we also suffer. You know, when I see this and they see the situation in country X, C, or D, and you see that it's completely unfair, you know, we suffer. So this is not fair. I'm sorry. So, you know, we have a system that works at international level, but in certain jurisdictions, we see problems. You know, from a practical point of view, but just my take, obviously, and with all due respect, the main problem with this is if we give FIFA jurisdiction at international level and at domestic level, adding this clause into domestic contracts, then, you know, we transform FIFA in a worldwide tribunal all around the world. And again, you know, when you are outside, you think, look, this is the right way to do, obviously. You know, and I think that your approach is totally correct. The main problem is, imagine that we have a local case and FIFA is competent now to deal with a local case in Vietnam, or in, I don't know, in a small country in which, you know, you don't know the language, you don't know the local jurisdiction law. So, you know, I think that we need to find a way to protect players at domestic level. But to tell you the truth, I'm not super supportive of giving FIFA full jurisdiction for local cases all around the world, because, you know, first we need maybe 500 more employees, then, you know, lawyers and legal counsels dealing with 250 different jurisdictions, languages issues. It is complicated from an administrative perspective. But obviously, I fully agree with both of you. We need to find a way to protect players in a better way in certain jurisdictions, and that's why, you know, in a certain way, we set up this FIFA fund for professional players. You know, something that we did in cooperation with FIPRO in 2020, giving financial support to players under exceptional circumstances. No. Because we are aware of this. Hopefully, this is not a pattern all around the world. It's just in a few countries, but definitely we need to do better, and we need to cooperate with FIPRO leagues and the clubs in a way to tackle these sometimes unfair situations at domestic level.
Emilio, may I add? I'd like to add something to what you said in terms of difficulty to implement what Patricia said, although of course, it's a good idea because we are relying on the quality of the jurisdiction of FIFA, and it's a quicker delivery of a decision of the jurisdiction. But also, it would be very difficult to prevent the national courts to dispute the jurisdiction with FIFA. We already see that. I'm personally facing something that is a dispute within an international level, and the ordinary courts, they simply will not drop the ball. They will not give up of having the jurisdiction. So if we think about implementing that on a domestic level, it will be, I think we will have many gaps. In many countries, it will not work, and maybe in other countries, the specificity of sports, a huge work to convince the national authorities that it would be better to submit to FIFA. So I think it would be very difficult to apply in a uniform way this access to the FIFA jurisdiction for domestic issues. But still, I think we have to dig to find a better way to implement these rules effectively in a domestic level. Roy, I'd like to hear from you. The Article 14 bis was actually a victory. Was it really important to the players, the inclusion of the Article 14 bis? Because we know that before the 14 bis, you just mentioned a domestic case where the player was not even able to declare the contract termination. He has to ask the court. But on the other hand, the system that we use internationally before FIFA, before the CAS, the player also has the burden, because if he understands that he has a reason to terminate and he's wrong, in the end, he's going to have to pay a compensation, maybe to serve a suspension. His new club maybe is going to be jointly responsible for the payment. So up to extent to establish an objective criteria, which means 2 months of salary of delay, was an important improvement in the player's protection.
Well, I obviously would like to think it was an important step, and I personally think it is. I would also, of course, like to hear from the sports lawyers here how they interpret it and how they think it feels. But for me, when we went into those discussions, and this was, I think, 2016, which was at the same time as when we implemented negotiated 24 bis, by the way. So that at that point we made some, in my view, improvements. Now, there's objective, right? It's objective. It's 2 months salaries and a 15-day notice. There's really very little to argue about anymore. It's 2 months, 15 days, not less. Of course, you can give more, but whereas back in the days, you more or less the jurisprudence was, well, 3 months and a default notice. But was that default notice 3 days, 5 days, 10 days? Nobody really knew. 10 days, you would be on the safe side. I've seen cases of 5 days where the Court of Arbitration of Sport said, well, this was too little time for the club to remedy their breaches. So personally, I think there is more legal certainty, which I think the players welcomed. I think you can also explain it easier to the players. I have to admit, 15 days staying at some clubs, sending a default notice is a bit of a challenge, because there are clubs around who do not take kindly to such a default notice, and you have to go for the next 15 days, in principle, still to the club to train and perform your duties, even though the club has not executed them, but okay. I think it's an improvement. But again, I would like to hear from the lawyers if they think the same. And you're right, Daniel. The part that you have to ask for the termination of the contract in certain jurisdictions minimizes the situations where, it completely eliminates the scenario where a player does not have just cause and has to compensate, right? In the end of the day, I don't 100% know which one I prefer. I think I prefer the FIFA system, that you have to terminate yourself, even though there are risks involved. But I cannot imagine that I'm at an employer and I really want to leave because I have to train alone, I am being discriminated, I am not being paid, etc. And that a court, as we know in some countries which are not independent, says, no, you have to stay. I cannot imagine that I would stay at that club. So I prefer the FIFA system, but it has both its pros and cons.
Okay, listen, Patricia, if you want to say something, you have 1 minute, and then Emilio, 1 minute about 14 bis, if you need to make any appointments about that. Emilio, fine? Okay, so we are speaking here up to now about things that are already in place, okay? So about the fixtures, things that are being, we are still waiting to be unfolded. And this is a hot topic. In 5 minutes, we're not going to get everything that we need from you guys. But Emilio, what is already settled with the stakeholders? What is already agreed by everybody concerning the regulations on agents that is probably coming next year. Is it really coming next year? Is there something that is still missing that shall be settled? How is this subject now?
Who knows the future? No? So what I can tell you is that obviously the FIFA Council and the FIFA Stakeholders Committee approved certain principles to be translated, implemented into regulations. So we are in a long process working with different stakeholders, consultation process with player agents, with group of player agents all around the world, European groups, so African groups, South American, North America, Central American group, Asian groups. We are also in contact, of course, with FIPRO, clubs, ECA, World League Forum. So we are having a long consultation process. We have in November, we circulated the first draft of the FIFA Football Agents Regulations. So we expect to circulate the second draft very soon among different groups. And the idea is that the FIFA Council approves the new agent regulations in the last part of the year, November, December, and these regulations will come into force as from 1st July 2022. So we are in the final phase. So the principles, as I mentioned, were approved by the stakeholders and by FIFA, licensing, CAP, education, transparency, clearinghouse. So the principles are there. So in football, nothing is secret. So, when you push the button, enter, send the email to one or two colleagues. So, everybody knows the first draft of the regulations. As soon as we circulate the second draft, and we have already circulated the second version with some groups, the regulations will be there and will be on your table. Daniel and some other colleagues will have a copy. But again, we are very close to reach an agreement with the main groups. Maybe we cannot make all groups super happy. As you know, and as we all know, I think that the key issue here for some group of agencies, the cap on commission. We are still negotiating, we are still working on the project, but we are fully convinced that the new regulations will bring us more transparency and a better system. And of course, we do think that the new regulations will be fully in line with EU law and the general principles of antitrust or competition law.
Thank you. Patricia, we're going to have to be very quick. So I don't want to put Emilio with the back on the wall. So I assume that the original structure that was suggested concerning the caps, free over the amounts of the employment contract and 10% over the transfer fee in the third case is still on the table. So I assume that, and I'm not going to ask Emilio. So
everything, Daniel, everything is on the table. So,
okay, I know.
Until the day the FIFA Council decides, everything is on the table.
Okay, but still, imagining that the original structure that we are discussing, that if it will suit better the market, what do you think? There will be a problem to adopt this schedule that was proposed concerning the caps. Can you see something coming?
Yeah, I think caps, there are caps. And as practitioner, we all know that such rules are circumvented very easily. So the idea is which will be the tools to enforce the caps. And not only the caps is an idea, but what I see as a practitioner, as a lawyer, even in France, we have a very tight regulation, but even in France, the issue is not only the cap, is how agents are paying sub-commissions to the father, the brother, other people. And that it's very important, because if you put a cap, there is so many ways to circumvent it. And I think that it is, everything is on the table, and that's very interesting, the way it's like this dialogue, because not only cap is a tool, but also conflict of interest, which are the tools to control the agent. And that agent will be considered as a stakeholder of the football, the whole football system. So this is a fascinating, and we all are waiting for this regulation, and I hope that we will be able to participate and to discuss this. And I think that this is the next more important step with the clearinghouse, because they are very linked all together, of course.
Thank you, Patricia. Roy, 30 seconds, because I really need to know what's the position of FIFPro concerning this schedule of caps. You have 30 seconds, my friend.
It is not to be explained in 30 seconds, Daniel, but it's for us, look, it's tied in. First of all, this whole discussion about agents is tied in with the overall transfer market, right? So we need to fix that. We need to have transparency, disclosure, and protection of the players, especially the most vulnerable ones. So it's not a yes or no question, that it is multifaceted, and we need to discuss it very thoroughly.
Okay. You complied with the timing rules perfectly. It's very difficult with me mediating here. So I'd like to thank you, Patricia, Roy, Emilio, for the excellent insights. I think it was a light session if we compare to our huge discussions and hot discussions just between lawyers. And I thank you, Socrates. We have to get back to the studio. Thank you very much. Be safe, please. And we see each other personally as soon as possible. Thank you, Al.
Thanks, Daniel.
Thank you.
Fascinating stuff. Delighted to say, if you've been joining us throughout the summer, we like to try and, between panels, interview various guests from the footballing world. Delighted to say Mick McCarthy, the Cardiff City manager, joins us. Hi, Mick, how are you?
Hi, Rob. I'm great, thank you. How are you? Long time no see, man.
Very good, thanks. Did you get a holiday, or did COVID get in the way of it?
It kind of got in the midst of it. I went away to Portugal on the green zone, and of course it went to amber 2 days in. But we decided to stay, and we isolated when we came back. So we had a great 2 weeks, Fiona and I.
What's it been like? I was going to mention this further down the line, but